the Daylesford podcast. Events, stories and people around the Hepburn Shire.
When I applied for my American visa just recently online, one of the questions was, if you have been to any of the following countries, you don't get a visa, and one of them was Iran. And in 2013, I was a guest in Iran at a storytelling festival.
Hey everyone, my name is Jared Pickford, and this is a Daylesford podcast, but not just covering Daylesford. I'm covering the whole of Hepburn community, and sometimes I'll go over the hills. That was Anne E Stewart you just heard, and if you don't know Anne E Stewart, there's a high chance you've only just moved to the area or you're visiting the area. Let's say Annie is a legendary storyteller, a local legendary storyteller. I caught up with Annie this week because I know she's an extremely passionate storyteller and she loves hearing stories, and she actually has a local podcast called The Cicada. It's all about people telling stories. Before the interview with Annie, I just want to give a huge thanks to everyone who listened last week. The podcast went really well, which means I'm going to keep making these every week, and what I would love for you to do right now, if you're listening on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button, or if you're on Spotify, TuneIn, Pocket Cast, or even on your iPhone app, hit the subscribe button, and then every week you will get a notification when the new podcast comes out. So back to Annie. On Wednesday, I trotted off to her house and we had a chat about her podcast and her upcoming adventures. It's cold Wednesday morning. I'm at Anne E Stewart's house. Just walking down here. How are you?
Good, thanks.
That's the way.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's so warm
Misty old
here.
morning, isn't it?
Oh, it's so misty. I was just talking about that.
That'd
be lovely. So you're heading to San Francisco, is that right? Can you tell us a bit more about that one?
Well, it's the National Storytelling Summit, and some Hawaiian storytelling friends said, Annie, why don't you come to this? Because it's a little bit of a different style in America, I thought, I should go and have a look. And they have storytelling everywhere in the States.
Can I ask, what do you mean different style? Because we were talking about this before, and I think there is a different style, but I couldn't quite pinpoint.
Well, what it is for me is that Americans love to tell personal stories. And now, everybody's a storyteller now. Everybody does personal stories. But in the UK, they hark back to those old traditional tales. And because they're so close to Europe, you'll hear the Nordic storytellers tell their great sagas. The Welsh have the Mabinogion, which is a famous oral tradition of stories. You might know that in Indigenous stories, and I hope I get to meet, and it's probably a similar situation to our Aboriginal people, the Native American people, who have the stories that help you live in the landscape and remind you of, honouring the gods, and something that's a bit closer to the earth, or something with those Indigenous stories. With the Djadjurrung people that live around here, the Regional Centre for Culture, which was funded by Regional Development Victoria, supported them sort of enhancing their stories and getting back their language. And some of the performances we saw last year were just so moving that, this is sort of what we need to tell. And sometimes I worry about Daylesford. Don't forget what our real story is. It's not just all about tourism business, as much as it's great because we get great food and different things happen because we're a big town, and I've driven through many a quiet country town where nothing's happening. But, with these important things, how can we sort of share what we have?
There's the material things about Daylesford, but what's for you? What's underneath Daylesford? What's under all that for you?
I suppose when I was studying at Ballarat University years ago, I had a friend that lived down on the lake, and just going out, we'd take the boats out from the boathouse and be in the lake in the middle. It's that sense of nature that's quite extraordinary to the region. And because it's a mix of sort of local Indigenous with the trees, and also the important autumn colouring that the Europeans have brought in, I do a lot of historical narratives in my stories, so it's always interesting to hear of how people came to be in Australia. I've been thinking our Swiss Italian festival's sadly fallen over, that perhaps it's time for something a bit different. And when I was in Glasgow a few years ago, there was a refugee festival, so to hear stories from all over the world, and it's what makes us similar rather than different. when I applied for my American visa just recently online, one of the questions was, if you have been to any of the following countries, you don't get a visa. And one of them was Iran.
Oh, wow.
And in 2013, I was a guest in Iran at a storytelling festival. And I made a little video about it. And one of the things that sort of came to me is the similarities rather than the differences. I found it kind of oppressive in some ways, and the headscarves and the, lack of communication and physicality with men and things, a bit challenging. But the people were just wonderful, and it's often governments that are the dodgy ones. So, it was just so interesting to see how everybody's so similar. With storytelling, they reckon that everybody has a sort of version of the Cinderella story, and that some stories are told the world over, So it's those similarities that I really sort of like to look at.
So that was the first half of Annie. Now I'm going to tell you all about what's happening around the Hepburn Shire this week. It is NAIDOC week, and there is a special screening of The Songkeepers tonight. It's free entry at the Town Hall at 6:30, and it's a doco on a special choir of Indigenous women touring Germany. On Saturday the 13th of July, this morning there are two farmers markets. There's the Balan Farmers Market and there's the Kyneton Farmers Market. Also today at 2:30 it is the Daylesford Pride Cup, and this is at the Daylesford Football and Netball Club at Victoria Park. I'm just going to read from the Facebook page here. The DFNC Club, in partnership with the Chill Out Festival, is proud to be hosting the inaugural Daylesford Pride Cup against Newland FNC. Other than the Pride Cup football and netball games, the club will be hosting a ticketed sit-down lunch with guest speakers, kids entertainment and information stands on a wide variety of organisations. Sunday the 14th of July, there are three farmers markets. There's a Daylesford one, there's the Meldon Farmers Market, and there is the Clunes Farmers Market. Also today there's an event called Viva la France, and this is at the Town Hall at 6:30, and they're playing French music and everything's French. It's $20 to get in, BYO food and drink, and there is prizes for the best dressed and table. This is to raise money for new instruments, and I'm guessing the instruments are for the brass band. On Monday the 15th of July at the Daylesford Neighbourhood Centre, there's poetry discussion and workshop, and that starts from 7pm and it's $15 per head. Ross, who is running this event, is a multi-award winning poet, and his poems have been published in The Australian, The Age and numerous other publications. Tuesday the 16th of July at the Daylesford Neighbourhood Centre, Rosie Ladeslow, her French classes start. You can contact Rosie for more information, 0437 165 645. Thursday the 18th of July at the Daylesford Neighbourhood Centre, there is a social craft group. Beginners are welcome. You can call Bev on 5348 2663. All welcome. And also this Thursday the 18th of July is the Cicada Story Slam with Anne E Stewart. It's at 7pm at the Daylesford Hotel, and here's Annie to talk all about it. The cicada, what is it? How is it? How did this come about?
A few years back, Rod May and I were in Brooklyn in New York, and we went to the Moth because as a professional storyteller, I'd heard long about these story slams. And what happened was an American guy, he was sitting outside in summer having a few beers with his mates, and the moths were fluttering around the lights. And when you're sort of on holidays, you tell each other favourite old stories, yarning it's sort of called, really.
Yeah.
And in America, the tradition is often for personal stories. So there was a moth night on in Brooklyn, and I said, Rob, we've got to go and have a look. I want to check this out. Well, there was a huge audience. The storytellers were stunning, and it was all professional stories. So when I got back, I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. So I applied for some funding from Regional Arts Victoria, because contrary to popular belief, storytellers cannot just live on air alone. So we applied, had help from Malcolm Sanders from Regional Arts Victoria, and we got some funding, and I pulled a team together. Wow. Maya Irel, who's with Our Words in Winter, Ash, who was recording for us, and I talked to the people from our local radio station. And so we set up this idea of having these story slams of 5-minute personal stories. We did some training workshops here at the Story House and Garden, and then we set up to have a grand finale at the Live Love Life Festival. But whoops, that festival fell over, so it all changed around a little bit. Oh, yeah. But we did it every 2 weeks, which actually was a little bit too soon. But our first year we were just settling in, and it was just amazing the stories that we got to hear. And I've been doing this for a long time, storytelling, but people kept coming up and going, "Oh, storytelling, it's so important." I'm going, yep, it's good. And just the people that would get up, local community members that you'd get to know a little bit more, you'd hear their stories. It just, you just feel greater empathy for these people when they have a go at storytelling.
Yeah, true.
And one of the things we do, which is a bit different from the moth that I saw in the States, we select a few people out of the audience and get them to be the judge. We tell them, it should keep to time, should keep to theme, and, a story that sort of takes you somewhere, has a beginning, middle and an end.
And so where do we find your work? What's your website?
So there's anneestewart.com.au.
What's the E stand for, by the way? I've always wanted to know.
Eileen, my grandmother. Or storyhouseandgarden.com.
And the cicada.com.au.
That's cicada.com.au. So there's a few different places you can find us. The next cicada is the 18th of July at the back room in the Daylesford Hotel, and we just eternally thank them for letting us have that wonderful space, and Sarah that comes to serve us. To
Sarah.
serve drinks and things, just
We know Sarah.
out of the goodness of her heart, we love her.
Bless her
She's
little soul.
she's even had a go at telling a story one day that was rather wonderful. It was great.
You have to put the microphone up. She's quite tall.
She is tall. And we do encourage people to have a go. We've got a few regulars that love telling stories, so that's great. We've just announced on the Friday of Words in Winter, we'll be having our Story Slam, but on the weekend before that, and it should be on the Words in Winter website, there's going to be a workshop here at the Story House and Garden. So if people would like to have a go and just would like a few little pointers, come along and we'll run you through your paces so that you're ready. But the next one on the 18th of July is from a favourite quote of my mother's. "Life is naught but froth and bubble, but two things stand like stone. Kindness in another's trouble and courage in your own." So the theme for that night on the 18th of July is courage.
All right, Courage, the 18th. That's next cicada. Thank you, Annie. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Jared.
And without further ado, let's listen to last month's winner of the Cicada Story Slam. This is Zane, and Zane has a very dry sense of humour. This is a pretty good story. Keep listening.
Hello. Yes, newcomer. My name's Zane. I'm a Ballarat native. Came here for the mineral water, obviously. The Dom Perignon of mineral water. And I'm going to tell a story about a night I had in a bar where I used to work. And this is the first time I've told a story. Well, it's not the first time I've told a story, but might be the first time people have listened. So I appreciate that. Thank you. This little bar that I used to work in is called Third Class. And that probably says it all. But I wrote a poem about the bar just to give you a little bit of context. The first couple of lines of the poem are banged up in Duckboard Place, locked face to face in a conversational embrace fueled by MDMA and rave juice. So that kind of gives you a bit of context of where we're at. And I worked behind the bar in this particular bar. Well, I didn't really work behind the bar. I was a bussy, but I worked behind the bar when it suited me. And it suited me on this particular night because I still remember she kind of drifted through the strobe light smoke and the lasers. And as soon as I heard her voice, I was in. And from there, I dropped the bucket and I was working behind the bar. And I gave away so many free drinks that I probably could have lost my job. But I didn't care because she was just perfect, you know? She was the one. And this is the story of that night when I met her. And it's a very long night because it still continues to this day and it still replays in my mind like one of those sad repeats on TV that comes up on Sunday morning when you're feeling a little bit lonely and emotional. And all of a sudden you go, oh, that was really nice, but oh God, that was really nice, you know? And I remember her voice because it was this perfect sort of English eloquence with just the right amount of mischief and wit. And I don't remember exactly what she looked like, but I remember her hair and her dress and her face, and I remember everything about her, not visually, but like as a feeling. You know, that feeling of looking at her is in every cell in my body. And I didn't care about losing my job. She was getting all the free drinks because as far as I was concerned, I'd already made a plan to move to England, and we were going to get a house and a Range Rover. I have a couple of little English kids, and might have even changed cricket teams, but I wasn't sure at that point. So I was trying to sort of pretend I was working behind the bar while I was doing my job as a bussy and cleaning glasses and scrubbing the toilets and pretending that that wasn't me, and then trying to figure out times where I could talk to her. And then my manager, Crispy, he said, oh, we need someone to go down to Coles and get some rubbish bags and get some Glad wrap bags. And I was like, mate, I'm in. Let me go to Coles. So I was like, I walked out, I found her. I said, look, I've got to go to Coles. Would you like to come? It's just a short walk down the street. I'm going to go to Coles. And she goes, yeah, great. And so I don't remember seeing her. I don't remember talking to her. But the feeling of this whole night, I don't even remember the words that were said. I just remember sitting on Collins Street, waiting for a taxi while she took her shoes off, and just being like so captivated and being like, oh, this is fantastic. You know, I love this girl. And then we walk down to Coles, and I'm getting some rubbish bags, and she's walking around Coles with her heels in her hand and black muck all over her shoes, all over her feet, sorry, which if I saw anyone else doing that after the races, I would be critiquing them heavily. But for her, it was like, oh, it's so cute and edgy and spontaneous, you know, it's like, this is great. And I got the things, and I really, you know, in that moment, I felt like I had magical powers because I was able to make time stretch. From the time we left the club, went to Coles, got in the taxi, drove back up Collins Street, and I remember going up Collins Street, and we could have been driving, or I could have just been floating up Collins Street talking to this girl. And it just seemed to go forever and ever and ever. And then I got back to the club and I walked in with the rubbish bags, and Crispy goes, where have you been? And it had actually been forever and ever and ever. Something that should have taken 5 minutes. Apparently I've been gone for like an hour and a half. And I don't know, you know, they change the aisles of the rubbish bags every time in Coles. It's not my fault. What am I to do? So anyway, as my manager Crispy is just tearing shreds off me about these rubbish bags and the fact that I've been gone for 2 hours, behind me somewhere, she drifted back into the strobe-filled smoke room that she came from, and just like that, she was gone. And all night, like, yeah, I mean, it's yeah. All night, I looked for it. All night, I was looking around, and people in those sort of environments, it's just like, you know, people are just going past you, and you're sort of blinded by these lights and flashing, and you see a face, like, is that the face? And it was kind of this weird thing where the longer I couldn't find her, it was like the more hope I had, because if I couldn't find her, it meant she still might be somewhere. But at the same time, I was like, well, she's not anywhere, but she could be somewhere, but I know she's not there, but she could be over there. It was brutal. Anyway, this particular club, usually we'd close up around 9 in the morning, and then we'd keep sort of drinking all day. And it was a long night because most of the nights there went for 3 nights. But this particular night was very long. And I just remember being in the front office, and all I had was her name. And I can't tell you her name because I can't remember it. But at that particular time, I had her first name, and I was in the office on Facebook. Let's say her name was like Charlotte. I was like looking up Charlotte from England. until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then just for weeks and weeks and weeks, I thought she's going to come back in, or she's going to, you know, I'm going to get a friend request, or I'm going to find her, or something's going to happen. But never. You know, never. And so the longest night, it is a long night because that night extended for weeks of like hope and like, oh, is she coming back? And every night I was in there, I was like, oh, that. And then it extends out incrementally now. As I said, it comes up every now and then, that sort of replay. And it's that replay of someone who could have been perfect, but probably wasn't. And the memory of being perfect is actually made worse by not having it finish, you know, because there's that saying, you'll never con an honest John, And the premise is that you can't con someone unless they think they're conning you. And the reality is that the headspace I was in at that time, I probably didn't deserve someone as good as I thought she was, even though she wasn't probably that good.
Thank you, Zane. I hope we see you at the next cicada. The Story Slam is back this Thursday night, the 18th of July at 7 p.m. at the Daylesford Hotel. Thanks for listening, everyone. And join me on Instagram or Facebook, the Daylesford Podcast, and I'll tell you more about what's coming up. Talk to you next week. Bye.